On April 26 of 1986, the largest nuclear energy disaster in history happened. At 1:24 a.m., two large explosions took place in the fuel block of the Chernobyl power plant, located more than 100 kilometers of Ukraine. The power plant that exploded was one of the most largest and important of the world. It was used by the Soviet army. But why did the explosion happen? That night at the power plant, an experiment was going on, and they don't prepare themselves correctly. The fuel overheated and caused the destruction of the generator's surface, and all because the inertial range of the turbo generator was not tested before. When the first explosion occurs, there was no problem. It was a common destruction, but in the second explosion, it burns prompt neutrons and that caused a big problem. After the disaster, they didn't follow the safety rules correctly, and the correct procedure which caused a big reactivity over the environment. Firemen tried to extinguish the fire caused by the explosion, but they couldn't do anything at the center of the reactor. Graphite was still burning. Like normal firemen, they threw water to the fire, but what they didn't know was that this was the situation, and a small explosion followed with reactivity contaminated. Later, they knew that this was getting worse, so what they did to stop it is that with an helicopter flying above the reactor, they threw 5,000 of tons of boron, dolomite, sand, clay, and lead compound, and this calmed the situation. There was such a big radiation that it affects the air in some other countries. Nowadays, there is no human life in there because they had to evacuate that town. When they evacuated, women and kids were the first to be saved, and they couldn't take pets with them because they thought that animals had radiation. It was a big problem that nowadays is still going on. Exponential growth applied at the beginning of the explosion because little by little the radiation started to be bigger and bigger and contaminate the environment. So it was an exponential growth. But now it's an exponential decay because the radiation is going down. They are working on eliminating all the radiation. And it was supposed that this year, 2017, they will finish, but they couldn't. So we will need to wait more years to this reach an end.
Exponential growth is the growth in which the rate rapidly increases in size and proportion over a period of time. Some examples of this can be the population all around the world is increasing each time faster, creating overpopulated cities and countries. For example, in the year 2000, the world population was 6 billion and today is almost reaching 8 billion. Another example is the Islam religion, that it is growing at a very high rate. For example, in the 2000 there were 1.3 billion of Muslims that are Islams, and now there are around 1.7 billion all around the world. Exponential decay is the opposite of exponential growth. Instead of going up, it will go down. An example can be the economy of a country. For example, Greece. Its economy went down a lot in the last few years. Another example can be the extinction of African elephants. Each year there are less African elephants and now they are dying at a high rate. In the 1900s there were 10 million and today there are around 500,000 elephants left.
It is difficult to contain the nuclear energy and the substances of the nuclear reactor of Chernobyl because it was an electric power plant with a constant growing nucleus, so it can be contained because the nucleus is constantly growing and producing energy. Also, it is dangerous because energy produces a lot of heat, so you have to keep it at the coolest temperature you can. If not, it will explode. The nuclear reaction generates an exponential growth of atoms because from 1 generates 2, from 2 generates 3, and from 3, 4. And it's always the same. It is growing and growing. It is difficult to know how long it will take to clean the nuclear energy and substances. It can last thousands of years. It is said that it has to pass an ice age so it can be clean that space, but there is an undefined period of time.
The implications of using nuclear energy is that it's extremely dangerous since a nuclear plant will never be 100% safe and the consequences will be devastating. And with a wrong move, it can cause a radiation leak that could be lethal. And nuclear energy is also very expensive and it doesn't last much. Nuclear energy don't use too much fuel as other types of energy, and nuclear energy emits no carbon dioxide and nitrogen oxides. Mexico has two nuclear plants generating 4% of the country's energy, one located in Mexico City and the other one in Veracruz. National Commission of Nuclear Safety and Safeguards are in charge of ensuring the safety regulations. Investigating, we find out that nuclear energy doesn't create contamination when it is used in a correct way. Energy plants create 4% of my country's energy. It helps and it doesn't affect the environment. The disaster didn't reach Mexico, but there is a rumor that says some people died because the milk that was exported was contaminated. Some environmental consequences of the Chernobyl disaster were that at least 13% to 30% of the 190 metric tons of uranium may still be in the atmosphere. Also, brines in the south of Russia still have a little percentage of radiation. Animals that are in Ukraine, Belarus, and Russia near Chernobyl, they might be contaminated, and that some rivers were affected by the explosion and affected the water in some parts of Europe. Consequences are catastrophic and may end humanity. It is important for all to know how to use and control nuclear power. A solution can be to stop using nuclear power, since there are more types of energy that are also effective.